continuing our Kingdom Truths series this morning as we revisit our core values and beliefs that we hold as disciples of Jesus and as a church family. And today we're going to be thinking through what God does through us, He first does in us. And what does it mean to say that? What God does through us, He first does in us. Well, I was thinking through that because, that's even a hard one to say. Like, I've been messing it up all week. Like, which one do we say first? And I was like, how do I illustrate this? Well, I'm going to start by sharing a cautionary tale, if you will, of a time that I tried to do through work without in work happening first. So let's talk about the time that I briefly became a construction worker, despite having absolutely no business doing so. So about 20 years ago, I went on a mission trip to Haiti. And that is a great start to a cautionary tale, isn't it? At the time that I went, you could sponsor a child. You would send them money every month. They could go to school. They would get special gifts and food packages. And another thing you could do was you could send money to build a house for them. And then you could go down and actually build the house. My parents did it. It was really cool. Some other people from our church did it. And it was really a special thing that you could do. And this program does not exist anymore. I called and checked this week, and it is not because of me, okay? Just laying that out there right now. All right, anyway, so here I was on my first mission trip, a fresh-faced 22-year-old with a lot of enthusiasm and very little marketable skills. And when the opportunity arose for me to go out on the job site with the house building team, I was like, oh yeah, let me get in that work truck. Because we could either work on the compound with the babies and kids, or we could go mix concrete. And I was like, concrete is where I'm at. Now, it didn't matter that I'd never touched concrete in my entire life. Never mind that I did not speak Creole. Never mind that at this time, if you were a woman and you were going to Haiti, you had to wear an ankle-length skirt the whole time for cultural reasons. So I would be doing this in 90-degree heat in an ankle-length skirt. All right. And never mind the fact that we did this entirely by hand. So there were no tools or anything. We had a bucket, a shovel, and a trowel, the end. Well, day one was fine. I carried water, I mixed concrete, I carried concrete. There was really nothing I could ruin. But then the second day was the block laying day for a house that real people were going to live in. And my experience kind of went like this. I'd pick up a concrete block. So these were cinder blocks. So I'd pick up this cinder block and put it on the wall. And then one of the Haitian workers would come up, no. And then say something in Creole and move my block and explain something else to me that I didn't understand. And I was like, okay, I want to do that. And then I would get some mortar and I'd put the mortar on. And another Haitian guy would come up, no. And then say something in Creole, scrape off my mortar, put new mortar on, and then tell me how to do it in Creole. And then I'd do it, and then a third guy would come up and say something different to me. Rinse and repeat for 8 hours of this. About 2 hours into this experience, I realized that my enthusiasm and my competence were wildly out of balance. And by the end of the day, so my dad was on this trip, by the end of the day, I told my dad, I don't really trust the structural integrity of what we have just done. I think this is a problem. And my dad was also a little concerned too. And my dad knows how to do all this. Well, several days later, we got to go back and they do a house dedication where we sing and we read scripture. I got to do that part, and that was fine. But when we got to the house, imagine my surprise when this house was beautiful. The walls were straight. There was this stucco, decorative stucco, all on the outside. It was gorgeous. It looked like this house could withstand a hurricane. And later, we actually learned that all of these houses were still standing after the 2010 earthquake. It was solid. And I asked one of the mission team people, I was like, what happened? Why does this house look good? And someone leaned over to me and quietly said, well, after y'all leave, the Haitian construction team take down what you mess up and rebuild it correctly. It's point taken. You see, I had enthusiasm, but I had no training. I wanted to build something, but I had never been taught how to actually build. You see, when we try to do holy work without spiritual formation, it might feel like we're doing something great. It might even be exhausting. But there is no structural integrity to it. Our efforts will not stand, and our stuff could fall apart pretty quick. But when we allow our own efforts to halt, maybe even be taken apart, when we do the hard and messy work of allowing God to shape us and form us into the purpose that He has called us, well, that's where it's at. That's what we mean when we say what God does through us, He first does in us. And today, we are going to hang out in the book of Exodus, and we are going to see how this process plays out in the life of Moses, the greatest leader and prophet that Israel ever had. But it didn't start out this way. And honestly, we usually tell the beginning part of the story and the end part of the story, and we skip this whole middle. And that's where we're going to be today. You see, Moses was born a Hebrew. He was raised Egyptian. He was educated in Pharaoh's court. And the book of Acts tells us that Moses had all of the opportunities afforded to him as a prince of Egypt. Cue the soundtrack now. Moses was powerful in speech, action, knowledge. Moses grew up in a privileged situation. He had access to experiences and information that he would never have had he been born enslaved with his Hebrew relatives. Moses also knew that he was a Hebrew. And at some point in his early life, he recognized that there was some injustice that was being done. And when Moses was 40, something happens. It says, one day, after Moses had grown up, he went out to visit his own people, the Hebrews. And he saw how hard they were forced to work. During his visit, he saw an Egyptian beating one of his fellow Hebrews. After looking in all directions to make sure no one was watching, Moses killed the Egyptian and hid the body in the sand. So last week I talked about making sure we check ourselves before we say enough is enough and start doing rash things. Moses did not do that. Nope. Moses had the knowledge, he had the position, he had compassion and courage, but he did not understand yet how God was going to deliver God's people. Moses swoops in thinking he's going to be the savior of this Hebrew. He kills the Egyptian, hides his body, and goes back home to the palace, probably feeling like he'd done something pretty good to make the situation better. And once again, Moses did not do that. Let's keep going. The next day, when Moses went out to visit his people again, he saw two Hebrew men fighting. "Why are you beating up your friend?" Moses said to the one who had started the fight. And the man replied, "Who appointed you our prince and judge? You going to kill me like you killed that Egyptian yesterday?" And then Moses was afraid, thinking, everyone knows what I did. Moses thought he was doing good work. He thought he was stepping up as a leader for his people. But he had no formation. To the Hebrews, Moses wasn't one of them. He was just the punk little brother of Aaron and Miriam who got to play prince while his people suffered. Who did he think he was telling them what to do? Even though Moses was in the right place in his heart, his hands didn't have it yet. And that probably felt awful for Moses. He thought he could use his position of privilege to step up and save his people, but they rejected him. Not only did they reject him, but they turned him into Pharaoh. Now his life is in danger. When Pharaoh heard of this, he tried to kill Moses. But Moses fled from Pharaoh and went to live in the land of Midian. When Moses arrived in Midian, he sat down beside a well. All right, so here is where we need to pull out a map because it is relevant and it is going to blow your mind in about 15 minutes, okay? So here's the map. All right, let me show you what this is. All right, I have a laser pointer. Yes, it's a cat toy. Don't judge me. I used what I had. All right. All right, so here's Egypt where Moses grew up, where the Hebrews were enslaved. All right, this is Midian, right about here, okay? And so when Moses fled to Midian, this is called the wilderness of Sin. This is the Sinai Peninsula. This is all wilderness right in here. There is not much. There are some green pastures down in here, but that's about it. And so Moses crosses the wilderness and goes over to Midian. And again, this is Arabia, so this is also wilderness. We're talking like wilderness all over the place. Listen, nobody likes the wilderness, okay? But we're going to be spending some time here in what the Bible Project calls the best, worst place to be. The best, worst place to be. It's not great. But over and over, from Genesis to Revelation, God teaches us that the real work, that in work we're talking about, that's done in the wilderness. And we may not actually be fleeing in the desert today, but at some point, we are all going to find ourselves in the wilderness. It could be a lost job or a death or divorce. It could be an illness, physical or mental. Maybe it's just a season where things are just not syncing up at home. Maybe the wilderness that you face isn't even involving people. It's a dark night of the soul where God just doesn't seem to be speaking, and our prayers feel like we're just shouting into the void. And some of you are there now. Some of you are coming out of it. Some of you are about to go into it. You just don't know it yet. However you get there, however much it absolutely stinks to be there, the wilderness is the time to pay attention. Because the only way out of the wilderness is through it. You are here. When I was a kid and people still hung out in malls, there were these like big kiosks in the middle that had this mall directory. It was like a map. And it had a list of all the stores, and you could figure out like where to buy toys or shirts or shoes or whatever. And there was always this like triangle on the map that showed where you were standing in relation to the mall. And it said, you are here. And if what God does through us, he first does in us, then recognizing where we are is the first step to letting God do that in work. When we find ourselves in the wilderness, the first thing we need to do is just recognize that we are, in fact, in the wilderness. Rather than just aimlessly wandering around or chasing paths that lead to nowhere, we just stop searching, stop wondering, look up and say, I am here in the wilderness. And that is really hard to admit sometimes because the wilderness conveys images of punishment and exile, death, no growth. It's somewhere that most people just wouldn't choose to hang out. But what if we shift our perspective a little bit? Because the wilderness isn't always punishment, but it is always formation. In the story of the Bible, people find themselves in the wilderness for lots of reasons. And I'm going to show you a few examples. It's not exhaustive. This is just a short list. So they can find themselves in the wilderness because of their own choices or sin. That's what happens with Adam and Eve, Moses. They can find themselves there because of the oppression of other people. Hagar and Joseph find themselves there for that reason. They could be escaping something really bad, and the wilderness is a refuge for them, like David and Elijah. And then they can also do it on purpose for preparation. Jesus, John the Baptizer, they go into the wilderness for that reason. A scholar I came across when I was researching this said, sometimes you find the wilderness, and sometimes it finds you. But however you got there, whether through your choice or the choice of your circumstance, you gotta get your bearings. Realize that, yes, in fact, you are here in the wilderness. And then what you do is you ask God to reveal to you the work that needs to be done in you during this time. It's not gonna be a party. But listen, there is never an instance in Scripture where a person exits the wilderness unchanged. Everyone changes in the wilderness. People are transformed in the wilderness. And let's see what that means for Moses. So here he is in Midian, And Moses sits down beside a well. And the well was like the center of the community. It's where people would go to get water for their families and their houses, their flocks of sheep, their farms, their plants, whatever. They would all come to the well in this area. So Moses shows up at this well and he sits down. And here's what happens next. Now, the priest of Midian had 7 daughters who came as usual to draw water and fill the water troughs for their father's flocks. But some other shepherds came and chased them away. But Moses jumped up and rescued the girls from the shepherds, and then he drew water for their flocks. Okay, a couple things here, okay? The priest of Midian is named Reuel or Jethro. And the Midianites were these nomadic traders who would travel all over the ancient Near East, moving goods and supplies and people everywhere. And so this is a foreigner. God sent a foreign priest to minister to the man who would one day become God's chosen prophet. When you find yourself in the wilderness, pay attention to who God brings you. Jethro is going to become such a formative influence in Moses' life. He's not an Egyptian. He's not a Hebrew. He's a foreigner from a family line that was traditionally at odds with Moses' people, the Israelites. The people who reach out to you when you are wandering are not there by accident. Find out what they have to teach you. Pay attention to what they say. And the influence of this family on Moses starts from the moment that he reaches the well. So there are 7 young women there who are trying to get water for their sheep. And this group of shepherds come up and they're bothering the women somehow. I don't know exactly how, but whatever it was probably super obnoxious. They were either trying to kick them out or hit on them or whatever. They just not being good. Whatever it was, Moses was like, oh, I got to step up. But this time, he doesn't do it with violence. He doesn't go kill the shepherds. He checks himself, and he steps up with service. God was already working in Moses, teaching him that violence leads to exile. And now God works through Moses to start rescuing others in a better way. The shepherds drove the women away from the well, so Moses steps up and draws water for them. And this was really heavy and hard work. And honestly, it was probably the first time Moses ever did manual labor in his entire life. And it goes very differently for him this time. The girls returned to Reuel, their father, and he asked, "Why are you back so soon today?" "An Egyptian rescued us from the shepherds," they answered, "and then he drew water for us and watered our flocks." And I just love what happens next. And y'all, I have been sitting on this for like years because I love it. I used to teach this, and it was one of my favorite things. So listen to this. Put yourself in Jethro's sandals for a minute, okay? You got 7 daughters. And judging from the behavior of these shepherds, the dating situation was bleak. They come home and said, this nice Egyptian man rescued them and watered their sheep. And he goes, I love this. Then where is he? Their father said, why'd you leave him there? Invite him to come eat with us. You met a nice boy and you didn't invite him to dinner? Go back and get your man. And so they do. God worked in and through Moses to show him that there is another way to fight oppression. And this time, it didn't get him cast out. It got him sought after and brought in. And Moses accepted the invitation, and he settled there with him. In time, Reuel gave Moses his daughter Zipporah to be his wife. Later, she gave birth to a son, and Moses named him Gershom, for he explained, I have been a foreigner in a foreign land. Now, of course, this doesn't happen overnight. Moses stays with Reuel, Jethro, and serves him by being one of his shepherds. He gets married and has a son. And by naming the son what he did, Moses is showing acceptance at his situation. Once again, God is teaching Moses not to be served, but to serve. God is showing Moses what it feels like to be an outsider in a new culture. And Moses spends the next 40 years of his life humbly serving Jethro, leading his sheep all over Midian to safe pastures. When we allow ourselves to be changed, when we allow ourselves to be taught in the wilderness, God will do it. And there are truly blessings to be found in the wilderness. Moses got a whole new family. You might find new friendships or strengthen old ones. You might say yes to things you normally wouldn't have time for. You might learn skills and visit places you never imagined you'd be. But we have to have the same posture that Moses did. Open-handed humility. Moses allowed himself to be broken. And he didn't fight his change of status. He didn't lash out at God that his palace was now a tent in the desert. Instead, Moses leaned in and he learned, and he gave God the space to work within him. And for 40 years, God worked. And what was happening back in Egypt during this time? Well, years passed, and the king of Egypt died. But the Israelites continued to groan under their burden of slavery. They cried out for help, and their cry rose up to God. God heard their groaning, and he remembered his covenant promise to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He looked down on the people of Israel, and he knew it was time to act. God didn't forget about the Israelites. Their leader just wasn't ready yet. Moses was right about the injustice being done to God's people. Moses was right to be angry about it. But Moses needed to go out into the wilderness to learn from God how to be the leader that would eventually shape these people into the nation they became. And after 40 years, God tells Moses, it's time. Get my people out of there. But this time, Moses doesn't act rashly. Moses doesn't go in swords blazing. Honestly, God had to do quite a bit of convincing to get Moses to step back into that world. And I know I'm skipping a lot. I only have 25 minutes, okay? So there were plagues, the Red Sea, there were pillars of clouds of fire and manna. You know the drill. People were complaining a lot. All right. Fast forward a month. A month or so after their escape, they reach Mount Sinai. And this is where Moses is going to meet with God and receive the law that the nation and religion of Israel would be built from. Let me show you where Sinai is, okay? So there you go. So it's the same map, y'all. Right here, same map. So there are two traditional locations, Mount Sinai, here or here. Either way, it's still right here in the wilderness. Listen, the roads Moses took when he led the Israelites to safety were the same roads he took when he fled. They were the same roads he walked as a humble shepherd for 40 years as he was leading the sheep to green and safe pastures. And now he took those same paths to lead God's people to green and safe pastures. Moses could lead them there because he'd already been there. And this is the crux of the kingdom truth. If we want God to work through us, then we got to let God work in us first. We have to do the hard and heartbreaking, messy work that comes from the wilderness so that we can be transformed into people who can look at the hurting and the broken and the oppressed and not behave as superheroes or saviors, but as people who can get down in the dirt with them and say, I've walked this path. You're not alone. Let me walk with you because I've been there. One of my favorite scriptures in the whole Bible is 2 Corinthians 1, 3 through 4. I first discovered it when I went through my own horrible wilderness. And it has come back to me in every wilderness I have crossed in my life. And it says, Praise be to the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of all compassion and the God of all comfort, who comforts us in all of our troubles so that we can comfort those in any trouble with the comfort we receive from God. God working in us in our times of troubles and then working through us to comfort others when they walk through their own wilderness, that is a beautiful cycle. That's how it was meant to be. And sometimes we get so frustrated because we want to do something big for God or big for our families or the people we love. And like me trying to build that house in Haiti, our hearts are fully in it, but it is just not working out. Or maybe we do take action like Moses did, only to be met with resistance and catastrophic failure. However we get there, we often find ourselves in the wilderness wondering why God is holding us back. But what if God isn't holding us back, but rebuilding us? The wilderness is hard, but the wilderness is holy. Don't rush it. Pay attention to where you are and who comes alongside you to walk with you. Because if you do the work, one day you are going to be leading someone else through their own wilderness with the comfort and the wisdom that you gained in your own time of formation. God never forgets about you. He didn't forget about the Israelites. He didn't forget about Moses, and he doesn't forget about you. He will never leave you alone in the wilderness. So let him do that work in you today so you have the structural integrity to do the good work he has prepared to do through you tomorrow.